When I raised my first army of miniatures in 1986 for the Warhammer rule, it was the Undead Army. The spring, '86 issue of Citadel Journal had made a deep impression on me, particularly the Undead Army presented in the scenario, The Lycomeister's Revenge. Heinrich KEMMLER, the Lichmaster, is a supreme necromancer whose will commands the dead themselves. In my army, he goes to war enthroned upon a grim palanquin borne by 4 wretched slaves. This macabre dais was once an ancient Slan priest from the Citadel range of the 1980s. Now converted, it serves as a blasphemous relic to carry KEMMLER into battle. KEMMLER is a level 4 mage who causes fear and masters the ritual of reanimation, which allows him to raise the dead. The figurine I use to represent him is the one released in the 90s, which I find very beautiful and much more majestic than the original figurine. Defeated at Frugelhofen and at the Maisental, the Lycomeister now knows that he is not invincible. He has therefore decided to train a disciple. A young Imperial student named Wachter Abgrundigenacht accompanies the army as a level 2 mage and as a general. Heir to a noble family, he frequently sits on the noble throne that he stole from his family. He is particularly drawn to the idea of illuminating the realm of the dead and uses many fire-related spells. He has mastered the reanimation ritual taught to him by KEMMLER. Ranlach the Black is one of Heinrich KEMMLER's oldest companions. He commanded the troops during the attack on the Gimbrin mine. This battle was part of the Terror of the Lycomeister campaign released in the 1980s. I chose to represent him with a Papo figurine for children. It is therefore larger than the other riders in the army and highlights Ranlach's importance within the army. Since his first battles, he has gained some knowledge of necromancy, observing KEMMLER's lessons as his disciple. He is classified as a level 2 mage and possesses the reanimation ritual. The last general of the army is a dark individual whose history is unknown. Some call him Milgant. Clad in grim rags, he seems to move as if hovering slightly above the ground, walking on thick blackish mist. He wields a terrible 2-handed scythe while creaking lanterns emit their faint light from his back. Like the other subordinate generals of the army, he is classified as a level 2 mage endowed with the ritual of reanimation. The Lycomeister's army includes a massive force of skeleton cavalry. Although armed with heavy lances, these riders are classified as cavalry. They instill fear in their enemies and are subject to the undead rule. They are led into battle by Lord Krell, an old comrade in arms of KEMMLER. Krell is a fearsome white king and one of the original 9 Dark Lords of Nagish. Krell was a mighty chaos champion in the days before the birth of Sigmar. Krell carved out an empire amongst the barbarian tribes of the north and then turned against the dwarfs to the south. He allied with the night goblins that stormed the dwarf strongholds of Carrick Ungor and Carrick Varn, and his name is recorded many times in the Great Book of Grudges, though he was eventually slain by the dwarf hero, Grimble Ironhelm, during the assault on Carrick Cadron. Krell's followers carried away his body and buried it in a barrow tomb among the dead of the Belthani tribe. Centuries later, Heinrich KEMMLER, the Lichmaster, came across Krell's tomb and freed the Ancient White. KEMMLER believes Krell to be under his control, but the servants of Nagish are not so easily dominated. Two units of skeleton cavalry armed with scythes stand out from the others due to their weaponry and non-skeletal mounts. This allows me to distinguish the troops assigned to this or that army corps. The army also includes 2 elements of Ghost Knights. They are classified as beasts, which reflects both their ability to traverse terrain and their vulnerability to flesh and blood-mounted troops. The figurines used are knights from the 100 Years' War by the Brand front rank, made of metal. They are remnants of my many historical armies from this period. At the whisper of the Lishmaster, the earth remembers the dead. Graves split open in the cemeteries of the Empire and Britannia, and countless skeletons rise, bone by bone, into silent ranks. Among toppled crosses and weathered mausoleums, they form their units as if on an unseen parade ground. Each cohort lifts its own banner, echoes of ancient wars. These tattered standards are faithful copies of those from the 1980s Skeleton Army box, or relics inspired by the Seigneur de Guerre game of the 1990s. Skeletons are personally devoid of will. They are only sustained by magic. They ignore recoil when hit by enemy fire, but any recoil in close combat results for them in sheer destruction. This is mitigated by the high morale rule that characterizes them and allows them to add +1 to their roll if they are defeated, but not doubled, by the enemy. They can be reanimated by the army's necromancers and cause fear. Enemies listen in fear to the rattling of bones from a horde of skeletons breaking the silence before battle. Note that skeletons, although physically made up of only bones, are animated by magic in a way similar to how muscles and tendons animate a living creature. A spear or arrow does not need to break a bone to destroy a skeleton. Any hit to an area that would normally be composed of flesh on a living creature will affect the skeleton. For this reason, arrows and other weapons deal normal damage, disrupting the magical bond as if they pierced flesh. Skeletons and zombies have no will of their own and require magic to remain intact. During the campaign known as Terror of the Lishmaster, Heinrich KEMMLER revealed the true purpose of his skeletal infantry. They were not merely fodder for war, but instruments of fear, patience, and inevitability. He raised them in silence, far from the enemy's sight, then sent him forward in vast, tireless columns. They marched without hunger, without rest, without doubt, binding down living armies through sheer persistence. KEMMLER used them to choke roads and valleys, to occupy villages already abandoned in terror. They held ground that no mortal wished to reclaim, standing motionless for days beneath rain and arrow fire. At the Battle of Maisenthal, their role became decisive. The skeletal regiments advanced through graveyards and ruined fields, emerging where the defenders believed no force could form. Their shields locked, their spears leveled, banners fluttering in decay. They absorbed the first charges of knightly lancers, their ranks collapsing only to reform moments later. While the living wasted strength and courage against the dead, KEMMLER maneuvered his elite forces with cruel precision. The skeletons fixed the enemy in place, turning the battlefield into a slow, grinding tooth. By the time the final spells were cast, the outcome was already sealed. Thus the skeletal infantry proved the Lishmaster's doctrine. Victory does not require speed or mercy, only endless ranks and the certainty that death will rise again. KEMMLER's guard is secured by two elite units led by Michael Jackson, from whose skull escape morbid flames. Like Ranlak and Krell, he is an old companion of the Necromancer. During the initial campaign led by KEMMLER in the 1980s, Michael Jackson led the zombie forces against the BOGEL farm. When the campaign was released commercially, singer Michael Jackson had just had an accident. His hair had caught fire due to the heat of a spotlight. The name of this skeleton officer and the flames coming out of his skull were therefore an expression of British humour, the release of the campaign coinciding with this accident. The Grave Guard are the elite infantry of the vampire counts. They are the former champions, knights, and warriors of ancient kingdoms, raised from their tombs to serve their undead masters once more. Unlike common skeletons, they retain fragments of discipline and martial skill. Grave Guard are heavily armored, often bearing ancient blades and great weapons. They march in grim silence, protecting their vampire lords and necromancers. Their presence on the battlefield symbolizes the might of forgotten empires. Relentless and unyielding, they embody death clad in rusted steel. The army consists of 4 units. I chose to represent them with 2 styles of miniatures in order to be able to distinguish the troops assigned to each corps of the army. 2 units are nicknamed the Lords of the Past. The army includes 2 units of gargoyles, enemy statues of Gothic tombs. The miniatures include some figures from the Heartbreaker brand from the 90s, but also a beholder from the Grenadier brand and venerable gargoyles from Breda, a renowned citadel regiment from the 80s. Giant bats accompany the army of the dead. KEMMLER mainly uses them to threaten the enemy's rear or to slow down main threats with their area control. However, they remain very vulnerable to shooting. The list of necromancers doesn't allow me to field artillery. Since I have a very old skull catapult that I didn't want to part with, I use it not as artillery but as a camp for the army. The parts were certainly delivered in a kit like cheap furniture, and the poor brainless skeleton gunners struggle to assemble the machine.